Welcome to the Starting Over podcast because wins don't last forever. I am your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of HeroClix. It's been a little while since I've done a cast, and a lot of interesting things have gone on. We've seen the release of a lot of good figures, mainly those from the Batman set. Also from the upcoming Chaos War, and for all you lucky individuals out there who are able to go to the cons in which WizKids is going to be at, all those nice prize swag that you can get from WizKids. If someone feels so generous to give me Martian Manhunter, I will be eternally thankful. All right. Well, let's hope for those of us that can't go to the cons this year, they'll give us a better way of getting those figures. And oh yeah, that Stan Lee. Oh man, that if you haven't seen that Stan Lee, go on the net and hunt around for it. It's a pretty interesting, awesome figure. So anyway, today what we are going to be talking about is compiling a 300 and 400 point team. And there are two separate categories, and it's very important that you understand the difference between the 2-point values, okay? And I'm going to give you a general scope, and then we're going to go into what each point value means. So when we're looking at 300 points, the first thing that we need to keep in mind is at 300 points, it is incredibly hard in the modern age for after July and even currently to get in what is staple called stop, support, telekinesis, outwit, probability control, and perplex. Okay, the Infinity Gauntlet does make some elements of that easier, but it's still pretty difficult. You can pay 15 points for the Infinity Gauntlet and you can get TK. You can pay 20 points for the Infinity Gauntlet and get TK in carry, and if you go through the whole dial, you could name a power and you can name perplex. You can put the reality gem on there and get probability control, but you're most likely not going to have probability control in TK on the same click, the TK gem on the same click that often. And if you do go down the dial, well, you have +2, +1 stats, may or may not have your gem. If you get +2 stats, then you're sort of out of luck. But here's the thing that we can look at, which is pretty good. In 300 points, the main thing that we're going to look at is that we are going to have a primary attacker, we are going to have a secondary attacker, and we're going to put in our support. And I would say at 300 points, the main thing that we want to consider is our primary attacker in this meta should be able to do a base 3 damage and have a minimum of a 10 attack. Also, it would be preferable if this figure that we pick has a way of what the military calls combat multipliers. So if that figure has perplex, probability control, super strength, range combat expert. I don't count close combat expert that much because unfortunately WizKids has decided that they don't want to give special power love to allow figures to move and use close combat expert. But we can see things like that. Now note, I'm not saying purely charge, hypersonic speed, running shot. Those things are best to have on that figure, but it is best that you have something where you're technically paying for a lower stat, but the power that you're given allows you to do more damage. So let's take Hercules from Secret Invasion. Hercules from Secret Invasion is a moderately priced click who would be in a 300 point game your primary attacker. You're definitely packing him with TK and you're definitely putting objects down, but those two objects that you pick up are combat multipliers. They are allowing you to do extremely more damage with your charge and a flurry attack. So Even though he's not as great as he used to be, he's still pretty viable for your Avengers teams, for those people looking at that Infinity Gauntlet next month event or upcoming event, or if you're in the future, already happened or is happening. There we go. So in 300 points, if we look at it in all seriousness, when we look at our team, we can say like, okay, I have some support elements, I have some attack elements, I'm able to do something. When we look at that in relation to our opponent's team, what we're also going to see is this. In a 300-point game, my opponent is limited based on A, their play style, and B, their team building philosophy. And remember what we said before, what do we see out of our opponents? How often do they play X, Y, and Z? Or what things do they like? Okay, so let's take, for example, there is a team that I know that's upcoming is going to be a Hydra team. Okay, this guy built an awesome Hydra team. I know that he always goes to his Hydra team when he wants to win something. Now, no, I can pack Energy Explosion, but you know that's only going to do so much good with the Mastermind given by Fisk and I think also Red Skull. So I have a choice. I can pack Pulse Wave if I say I really want to hurt Red Skull. I can figure out like, man, he's going to have a swarm of guys. It's probably a good idea to make sure that all my attacks hit and none of his hit, or very few of his attacks hit. So this would also mean packing Barrier or impacting Probability Control. If you're able to find a figure that has Probability Control and Barrier, and they are there, I've talked about him on this show, you have a great little advantage that you can use so that your opponent now, even though they have more figures, and even if he does get his leadership role, he's going to have to squander an attack that would have been on your figure on a barrier piece. So that's something to consider. So you can say, hey, I know this Hydra team is going to be there. It's going to be a #1 contender. I'm going to pack this figure with Barrier and Probability Control. Again, I'm not saying its name because I want you to go look him up because he's a great piece and he's relatively cheap. And then say, hey, Energy Explosion isn't going to quite do it, but man, some single target Pulse Wave would be great. Or if I was able to, get some effect where I can get some knockback going to break up his formation, you could say like, oh, there's that Thor that does that. So you could throw that out there. He's 200 points, and you can say like, well, dang it, that's going to make a tentpole team. Let me get rid of that figure and put in this other figure that will do range combat expert, because I know that those Hydra agents only can take 4 clicks of damage and then they're dead. So if I just range combat expert every turn or every other turn on those Hydra agents, they won't be able to do that much. Or you could say, man, Hydra team ability requires line of sight, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a stealth team with Beta Ray Bill from the Annihilator's Fast Forces, so that he can't draw line of sight on me for his team ability with Hydra, and I'm also able to shoot back at him even at a close distance. So there's multiple ways for us to solve our problems here. Okay? So at 300 points, we have to remember the following. My opponent, I can't have everything support-wise, so my opponent can't have everything support-wise. I can have damage, but the more damage I have in raw numbers, literally like the less support figures or less attackers I'm going to have. It's better to have combat multiplier powers, range combat expert. Even in some cases, I will add Energy Explosion into that, but that's a situational thing, and you have to also know that they don't have toughness. Oh gosh. Anyway, Energy Explosion, Super Strength, Range Combat Expert, things like that. Perplex. Okay? So when we go and we look at at situations like that, I have a honest to God, no gauntlet team, in which I'm using right now. You can check out the thread in the Play It by the Post section on HC Realms. Doing some testing with Absorbing Man. It's technically if you look on the forums, like Abs to Man or something like that. But I'm using Zavin at 75 points, Black Bolt 133 points, Rick Jones, who is 48 points. He's going to AE into Captain Marvel, and an AIM agent at with 38 points. We're under 300 points. Okay, what do I have? Okay, I have 2 Scroll Team abilities, which pretty much gives me Ghetto Super Senses. I have Rick Jones, who's giving me Perplex. Zavin can click to a Perplex click. And I have an AIM agent giving me Perplex. I have triple Perplex. And Black Bolt has a base 4 damage with Running Shot and Pulse Wave. I have no excuse not to hit my first attack. Okay. Zavin can TK. Also, in late game, Zavin can be an attacker, and Rick Jones can AE into Captain Marvel to give me probability control. Probability control is awesome. Okay, if the AIM agent is hit, he'll drop from Perplex to support. So really, out of everything that is in the stomp metaphor, the only thing I really don't have access to is Outwit. Okay. So I have access to Perplex, I have access to probability control, I have access to support, I have access to TK. Okay? So I don't have everything all at once. But I do have access to a lot of great powers when I need them. Also, it's cool that later in the dial that if your Black Bolt does get hit, he's pretty easy to heal. And also he has scrolls and shape change, so it just makes him so annoying to hit. So that's an example of a 300-point team in which you can play that will not cost you, that's not going to cost you arm and leg. And if you're looking for a fun team to play, you can play that team and do well. But it's a good example of what a pretty good balanced primary, secondary attacker support team looks like. And the great thing about AEs, and I know people like, you need to stop talking about AEs, but the great thing about AEs that I find is that AEs allows us to have a figure that starts off in a support role. Look at your Bruce Banners, your Superman, your Clark Kents, Rick Jones, Matt Murdock, who is a Norman Osborn, my boy, Norman Osborn. You have all those figures. What was it? Wonder Woman's AE from. Dang it, I forgot Wonder Woman's Diana Prince. Diana Prince, not the LE. The Diana Prince, the normal AE. All of them start off with like great support ability. Okay. And then they transform into this attacker. And when do you need that attacker? Late game, because your main hitter is just battered and bruised. And then sometimes, definitely in the case of Norman Osborn, you can get other support powers. So like Norman Osborn has the ability to turn into Green Goblin or Iron Patriot, depending on how you roll. You might be forced to pick one or the other. But I found that Green Goblin is great because you might not need Outwit anymore, and you need Perplex. Or you could say like, hey, I still need Outwit, I need Iron Patriot. So, those options are there. You have some that are like the Hulk AEs, Bruce Banner into the various Hulks, where you're just determining how much muscle or what type of muscle you need. So just sort of keep that in mind, that even though you're paying a higher price for AEs, instead of the cheapest there is, but for that added cost, you're getting an additional value of late game aggression. So don't underestimate AEs in 300-point play. Okay, now let's look at 400-point play. 400-point play is greatly different than 300-point play. Now, some of you might say, well, why is that, Edward? I don't see how it can be different. Well, first off, the biggest thing you have to realize is that 400 points for your team requirement for theme team, it's increased because it's in batches of 300. So if you're not exactly in a 300 say batch, you're going to round up to what you require. So once you hit 400 points, it's tougher to hit theme. Okay, it's not easier to hit theme. It's tougher to hit theme. It's only easier to hit theme if you're running a non-generic. Okay, a non-generic theme team has the higher possibility of making theme at 400 points than a non-generic. Okay, I mean, sorry, than a generic theme team. I apologize. Okay, so now we're seeing like, hey, I can run X-Men. I can run Fantastic Four. I can run Thunderbolts. I can run all these various different things. And Justice League, Teen Titans, what else? I'm trying not to have, just Marvel preference here. Green Lanterns, whatever. Okay? That means that those teams can come out, but also at 400 points, we hit what I like to call the Nuker effect. And I'm going to coin this, the Nuker effect. The Nuker effect is as follows. At 300 points, while one can do an alpha strike and probably kill a figure, now note, please note the word I say, probably. In 400 points, built right and very streamlined, a team can kill a figure in one turn. Okay, so it's technically the nuclear option. A lot of people would say this is first strike. I'm not going to say this is solely first strike, because you can be shot at and retaliated on, and still in 400 points, you can one-shot a figure in a turn. Now note, I'm not saying, oh yes, my figure with 7 damage after I do all my multiplication of my super perplex powers is going to one-shot a Pog, or is going to one-shot a support figure. No, you're talking about 6 or 7 click figures in the modern meta that can be just completely obliterated, okay, in one go. So what that means is this. Your primary attacker in 400 points has to have a minimum of 8 clicks, because 7 damage is way too easy to get. And I mean that like this. 7 damage onto one single figure distributed through whatever means, through game effect, through trait, through map, through whatever, is too easy to get in a 400 point game. Really, in a 400 point game, yeah. So you want to really watch how you place, but you want to say in your team building, I'm going to look at this option, which involves me playing, let's see, a 150 point Superman, but I'm going to have Eradicator, and I'm going to have some other, let's see, who else would Steel. You might say like, oh, this looks awesome. But then you realize, oh, my Superman can be nuked down. My Eradicator, even though he has a lot of good upfront support to defend himself, can be nuked down. And then you look like, oh man, my Superboy, he's not that deep either. Okay, so while your team is all nice and neat and it doesn't even meet team requirements, it won't be able to stand up against the brunt of damage that is going to be thrown out at you. So if we're going to look at something that's probably a little bit more viable, and I'm going to bring up an old team, so bear with me. And a lot of people are like that figure's retired. It's an older team, just for example case, because the Gauntlet does screw up a lot of things, and I will address the Gauntlet. Okay, so we have Diana Prince, 32 points to AE and to Wonder Woman. I have Norman Osborn at 66 points. I have both AEs. Thank God for that. That was a blessing. Novar at 141 points. Lisa Draca at 72. I think I merged some stuff. Still, I don't think my points are adding up quite right. I had Lisa Draca 72. Merlin 55. Clark Kent 23 points, and Val Cooper at 7. I wonder if I actually did this team right, or is this a glitch? No, I actually did do this team right. 396. Okay, so this is to my amazement, a 400-point floor team from way back in the day. Okay, now note what's so significant about this team versus some other things. The first thing that's significant about this team is, like I said in my previous, in the 300-point team, is I have a whole lot of support. I have Diana Prince, I have Norman Osborn, I have Lisa Drac, I have Clark Kent, I have Val Cooper, who's technically just a tie-up pog. Okay, I have an attacker in Novar and Merlin, and Novar is going to have a ridiculously high attack the entire time. So there's no excuse for him to miss at all. In my early game, it looks like, oh yeah, we're going to wipe the floor with this guy. But if my opponent fails to one-shot Norman, to one-shot Diana Prince, and of course Norman has Mastermind, so he's going to mastermind that off to Val like nobody's business. You're going to be like, Norman turned into Green Goblin. Now he has, another perplex and another attacker, that solid attacker. Oh man, I didn't hit Diana Prince just right. Now she's Wonder Woman. Okay, I think that one gets Flurry. Merlin is just sitting back shooting the fire out of my team. For me to get to Merlin, I have to get through all this fodder. And Novar's just running around acting crazy, and Lisa's perplexing up his attack or damage depending on the situation. So my opponent, yeah, they could burst down Novar, but that won't solve the fact that if they've come and burst down Novar, my team is just going to retaliate, like really big. So if you say to yourself, 400 points, I'm not going to have a figure, or my main attacker isn't going to be 8 clicks or more, you just say, hey, okay, I'm going to make sure that I have more than enough attackers or threats that my opponent does not feel safe fully committing to kill one figure. So that's another way of thinking about it. And again, older team, we're taking the gauntlet out of this for right now, because team building now, unfortunately, is crazy because of the gauntlet. Okay? So, with the gauntlet, let's go back to 300 points. The gauntlet changes how things are going to work in team building, because you're going to say to yourself one of the following. I am going to use this big figure with Power Cosmic, and I'm choosing to use X, Y, and Z gems, or just X gem. Or I'm going to pick a figure that doesn't have Power Cosmic or Indomitable. Please note, you really don't want to pick a figure with Indomitable, because even if you add the full gauntlet on there, you're double paying for willpower. You're not being efficient with your points. So you're going to come back and say, like, okay, I'm not picking somebody with willpower or Power Cosmic because I'm putting the full gauntlet on one individual. This figure better have, 8 clicks, 9 clicks, preferably in 300 points. You can say, like, these guys are going to be my attackers. Okay, so with the situations where you're putting the gauntlet on the attacker, you want to make sure that you can get that figure downfield, or if you're going into that I'm going to stall mindset, then what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you have a means to stall on any map. And so that either means that you're going to build a team for map selection, or you're going to build a team that can either run around, not be touched, has a real hard time being targeted, whatever. Okay? Now let's come back. Let's really come back at this. In 300 points, by putting a gauntlet on your attacker, your main attacker, that's probably, in most games, it's going to be about at minimum a third of your team to 2/3 of your team. Okay, so your gauntlet wielder is the king of England, Japan, China, and South America. That's how important how important your gauntlet wielder is. So you also have to realize, with being the king of so many places and nations, that your nuclear capacity is through the roof. So you need to figure out, okay, you have a highly offensive figure that you're making even more offensive through some means. The best example of this is Stranger. Stranger with the gauntlet plus 2 aim renegades puts you at a beautiful position, game-wise, to manipulate the gauntlet. The odds are in your favor to choose map unless someone figures out something even more broke about picking map and using the gauntlet. Then you're able to be in a position where you just go hide in the corner, alternate barrier with the 2 aim renegades, and just crank up the gauntlet until you get +1 or +2 stats. Once you get there, you're able to say, hey, this is awesome. I am now going to deploy. You can poke out and do like a hypersonic speed attacking in on occasion. It all depends on the situation. I'm not going to say don't do it. I'm not going to say always do it, but be wise in your how you pick your figures. I mean, not your figure. Pick your opportunities of who you're attacking. So that's a great example of, wow, this figure is completely awesome at 300 and is almost broken with special power and being able to name your own power and plus stats. Okay, but most of the time, if you're going to invest in a character with a point value around Strangers, if it wasn't for his special power, I would tell you go and get some figures with better starting stats. You're looking at a minimum of 11 attack. You're looking at somehow doing 4 damage, inherently. Preferably have some way of getting running shot or having pulse wave on your dial, because running shot pulse wave is just required just so you can kill other gauntlet users. So that's how I see 300 points working out. Okay, when we look at 400 points, let me add in one other thing. There is a bit of tech going around right now where people are putting a partial gauntlet on a support piece, like Astral Doctor Strange. This can work for your benefit if you have a hyper-aggressive team. Outside of a hyper-aggressive team, it does not work. It's not worth your points. It's not worth your time. It's not worth your investment. So just keep that in mind, that there is options of putting a 15-point gauntlet on a figure just so that they can, one time TK, or one time prob, or even say like, hey, this figure just dances around the map harassing with outwit. If they get the +1 stats, then that's more than a bonus. You have to look at it very creatively like that. Okay. Next up, in 400 points, I'm going to bring out a figure because this one was requested by a great individual who sent me a message at AC Realms at Avarice HeroClix. Big up to you. About Larfeez. And I think Larfeez is one of those figures where I'm going to make some statements here. And I know some people will probably not agree with what I'm about to say. Larfeez is not bad. Larfeez needs good situations. The gauntlet can give him very good situations. Larfeeze needs the full gauntlet. I'm not gonna lie. Let's start off with the basics. Larfeeze needs the full gauntlet. What else does Larfeeze need? Larfeeze needs the ability to just crank out a ton of pogs just to flood the board. He needs tons of constructs just to annoy the crap out of his opponents. Okay. What else does Larfeeze need? Larfeeze needs some sort of interference to allow Larfeeze to do what Larfeeze does best, and that is poison and punch people through constructs. Okay, so with your team building for Larfeeze, your first thing you're looking at is full gauntlet. And at 400 points, this is going to be awesome. Next thing that you're looking at is I need some sort of defense. I need barrier. So let's go DC 75th. Ice. Wrong figure that begins with I. Ice is great. She's a good attacker. One ice is good. Two ices are better. Alternate barrier or double range combat expert in a turn. Both are good, and you're still really cheap on points. Next, I would say is that lovely guy, or you can put in that lovely guy I talked about before, that does barrier and probability control. Barrier and probability control. So that's another one. I would also, if you can fit it, put in 2 Johnny Quicks. Really, you could just stay in the DC 75th set. But the 2 Johnny Quicks, just wonderful brokenness that you can do, because you can choose. I pump up Larfeeze. He has the power gem. Larfeeze now has a 13 attack. He has 0 range, so he gets close combat expert with the power gem, and you just punch a dude for 5. Just poof, just go to town on him. So that's, I think, would be awesome. If you had some other way to give, like when Larfeeze starts naming powers, the only power that he needs to name is Outwit. And it happens at the beginning of your turn, and then those people are like, oh, get it. Is that he names Outwit, he outwits somebody's defensive power who can be outwitted. And then he just like, boop, you take poison, sir. Ma'am, robot, thing, blob, alien. You take poison. So Larfeeze is feasible. I will say Larfeeze can't take a hit worth a darn. So you have to make sure that Larfeeze does not get hit. You have to do everything in your power to make sure he does not get hit. You have to do everything in your power to make sure that the guys that are running shot pulse waving along the map do not reach you. Also, the other cool thing about Larfeeze is this. Larfeeze can really, at 400 points, mess with teams that are built around stalling with barrier. And I know some people might be like, how is that? Like how can he mess with figures that stall with barrier? Well, the most interesting thing is this. If you have like a figure go out and break a wall, a barrier piece, you can move a Larfeeze construct token into that open area. Because remember, there's no debris from barrier. Okay. The other thing that you see is like a lot of those barrier walls are very, very, very dependent upon you constantly keeping that wall in that same position. And so by putting a hole or a crack inside of the barrier formation, they're forced to attack Larfeeze construct. And you might say, oh, I don't like that, But think about this. They have attacked your construct, which costs you nothing but an action. You're power cosmic now, so you're not taking pushing damage. Well, let me rephrase. Your willpower and can't be outwitted. Okay. You look at that situation of you're not taking pushing damage for it. They've wasted an attack on a pog so that they can keep doing what they're doing. So a thing that cost them one action now costs them two actions. And it's up to you to monopolize on that. If they choose not to and they just leave it there and ignore it, Larfeeze punches another barrier wall down and you like just go to town. And again, remember, he's going to close combat expert through his construct. So those are things to consider. I think Larfeeze is a fun figure to play if you're able to put the full gauntlet on him. And come to think about it, you probably couldn't fit two Johnny Quicks and two Ices with him. Yeah, not at 212 points, but figure something out. Have fun with it. I think the best options with Larfeeze is the full gauntlet, unless you're going to go into the era of feats. And you know what? Come to think about it, even in the era of feats, I would probably still say you're coming out cheaper picking up the gauntlet, because the closest thing that's going to give you everything that you need, you know, minus all the cool powers, is Fortitude 25 points, Endurance 5 points, and Armor Piercing 10. So you're already at 40 points. Okay? So you're really better off with the gauntlet. So, all right. Moving on, sort of developing into that 400-point game about the gauntlet a little bit better, is that in that 400-point game, we already remember this other team can nuke us. This other team can do tons of damage. We have a choice once that gauntlet comes in. Our choice number one is, you know, when we use our gauntlet, is when my gauntlet wielder speaks, how many figures on the board listen? And I'm saying this metaphorically. When my gauntlet user comes out for an attack, in my opponent's mind, how many figures is he afraid of dying? That is going to determine the strength of your gauntlet candidate. One major candidate I've seen used a lot in my personal games is Namor. Namor comes out, someone's going to die, and he's going to heal, because it's inevitable that Namor always comes up in charge flurries on Soul Gem. It's inevitable. So he's picked up his object and whacked me for 6, and then hits me again for 4, and you know, something's dead. You know, there's no way to get around it. Something's dead. So you can look at a wielder like that, or you can look at another wielder, which again has come up a bunch, is a 200-point Superman from Fast Forces. Is, hey, 200 points, not that big of investment. Just, oh, full gauntlet. I have support. Go kill him. And he can do awesome things with, yeah, he just does awesome broke things. Things that I wish that he couldn't do. You hit him real good, he's all right, but he still lays in a lot of damage. But that's just been my game, so take it as you would like. Okay, so in the long run, the biggest thing that we have to look at in that 400-point game is, can our gauntlet wielder scare the pants off of our opponent, and then also how many figures can we kill in a turn. You need to measure it like that. Really, from 400 points to about 600 points, you're looking at one figure. Really, at 600 points, it's 2 figures. That when they act, they're removing figures from the map each turn. So that's what I want you to think about. Now, side meta conversation. If you decide to deal with massive hitters and mitigating their damage through Mastermind, be forewarned that, first off, you need to be very careful for Pulse Wave. Of course, you know, Pulse Wave and Energy Explosion. But you need to find a way of saying how I'm going to solve for Pulse Wave. Because even if it's not single target Pulse Wave, Pulse Waving your whole squad of minions is going to suck. Let's be honest, it's not going to be fun. So you need to figure out how are you going to solve for that, and barrier really is the answer to that. So you need to figure out how you're going to work in barrier. Okay? Well, with that being said, I know that there is a lot of stuff that's come out. I know that HC Realms has a new AV section. You may or may not see something of mine posted there. Why is that? Well, if you listen to my other podcast, you know that I, on occasion now, will be having work up on that other website, which also talks about HeroClix, and we are not allowed to post podcasts or anything that would threaten HC Realms' popularity, being the #1 HeroClix website with huge populace. I don't see how you would be threatened. But fortunately, I can say, I don't think the situation is great, and I think that rule should be changed, but I'm betting that it won't, and I'm betting Typhon won't let up on that. So, if you look for my podcast on HC Realms, you will see it in my signature. If you're getting it on iTunes or RSS feed or wherever else, do me a favor, go over to my Blip page. I think it's startingover.bliptv or blip.tv/startingover. Whatever, click my little signature and my link in my signature on HC Realms. You'll go to it and watch a show or two. If the commercials roll, hopefully the commercials roll, your 1 or 2 cents that you have given me will go to a good cause of me buying more clicks. All right. That's it for the Starting Over podcast. And I'm your host, Edward Shelton, a.k.a. Dark Logos. And remember, we all have to start over sometime.